Hi, Philip. Welcome to the Rowover podcast. Do you mind just introducing yourself quickly?
Thanks for having me. My name is Philip Doyle, and I suppose I most commonly identify to the rowing community as one of the Irish men's heavyweight rowers. Been to Tokyo and most recently qualified for Paris there, winning a bronze medal in Serbia for the men's double sculls.
And congratulations for that. And congratulations for
Cheers.
qualifying for Paris as well. The main sort of reason that I called you up and sort of reached out to you for the podcast is I've seen a lot of your content online, and when I was doing research for my dissertation project, I found that you were probably one of the highest sort of followed rowing influencers that I could find, full stop, and sort of by quite a long way. So do you mind telling me sort of how that came about and how that happened?
So I suppose I'll give you a little bit of like my background as well. As like I only kind of came to rowing in second year of university myself.
Yeah.
And before that had been just doing my own fitness and played field hockey to sort of like a under 18 and national and provincial level.
Hmm.
And then kind of went to do medicine in university and kind of put it to the side, and then just took up the rowing and always had an interest in. My father was a cameraman for the BBC.
Hmm.
There's always cameras and things lying around the house, and I always had like not a massive vested interest in videography, but like always was interested in being behind the camera and shooting content and seeing how that would come across. Um, and then I'd sort of been in doing a bit of modeling for a year, two, three years, maybe the first couple of years of university. Um, Controversially, potentially, was involved in the whole topless Abercrombie thing with
Hmm.
that guy Mike, who has come out as, and like I wasn't, luckily wasn't part of that. Fortunately, medicine actually by medicine and rowing
Hmm.
away from that kind of lifestyle, which was one of the main reasons that I went back into competitive sport, because I was like, this isn't the lifestyle that I
Hmm.
had ever imagined for myself. But in that way, you were part of photo shoots, and you were getting good content made, and you sort of appreciated what like a nice professional image was, and
Hmm.
how well I could do. And you sort of looked at how branding and things came across on social medias for other brands, and you were doing um adverts, and you were on billboards and that kind of thing, and it was fun, and I loved doing the photo shoots, and I loved that creative side of like content creation. And
Hmm.
even though I wasn't actually creating it myself, you're always part of it, so I always had that like link to like that creator side of lifestyle. But at that stage, the influencer wasn't really born at that point. Like I was
Yeah.
back in 2011, 2012, where,
Okay.
Rob Lipsett was probably one of the biggest guys in Ireland, and he was a YouTuber. I'm sure you know him. And there's people like Jeff Said and like Matt Ogus, like big, huge YouTube personalities. But the whole
Hmm.
influencer social media craze hadn't really taken off. Um, but I always seen that it was a like, it was something that would, if I had something interesting, I would always put it out there. And whereas I know a lot of people on Instagram, they kind of, or social media, they kind of, if something interesting happens to them, they kind of hold on to it for a while. And like,
Hmm.
I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy things internally, because I definitely do. And there's a lot of my life I don't put on there. But I suppose to actually answer your question, I suppose to, instead of rambling, I just kind of enjoyed content creation. And a
Hmm.
lot of people always seem fascinated with how I balanced medicine and rowing.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And then that kind of built slowly through university, through sort of like the box scene and the Irish university scene, and then doing well at the university level, and then starting to maybe knock on the door of the international level and winning a few erg competitions. And I was kind of this guy who had never rowed before, who showed up and pulled a 601
Hmm.
at an indoor competition, and generated a bit of who is this young guy, like, like what's going on here. So that kind of created a bit of interest around it. And then from there, I kind of enjoyed relative success on Instagram, I suppose,
Hmm.
compared to other rowers. But like last year, it massively exploded, and like there's a cap of rowing Instagram followers. I have figured it out. It's probably in around 45 to 50,000.
Yeah, that's sort of
People
what I came to
are.
the
So
when I was
if
doing
you
my
look at
project
people
as
like
well.
Ollie Zeidler, they're in the 40s.
Hmm.
And they kind of, you have to stretch outside the rowing community to get to that number. Sinkovic is in around 50. Like I went on holidays to Croatia after racing them, and the
Hmm.
taxi driver was like, "You, Sinkovic, I see you," and I was like, "What is he talking about?" And then he threw up the Google, and he was like, "Oh, it was a photo of us and the Sinkovic's on the podium," and he was like,
Hmm.
"I see you, I see," and I was like, "Geez, they're actual celebrities within their country. The
Hmm.
media love them. They actually have a lot of social pull within Croatia." So I was like, this is where that was something to explore later in the podcast about how like media portrayal and how whatever the country sees as an important sport will boost that sport. But I see them capped out at sort of that 40, 50. The Kiwi pair, Eric and Hamish, are like in around the 30s, Mahe's in around 30s, Robbie's in around 35. So there's like that kind of cap off. Now there's a lot of Italian lads in around a lot higher, but
Hmm.
they have 90,000 followers and they get 3,000 views on a reel. So I'll let you make your own conclusions there. But you kind of that I was stuck in around that sort of mid 20s, 20 mark, like growing
Hmm.
slowly, 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 putting out content, putting a good bit of effort into content. And then last year, sort of that sort of lifestyle factor of my content started to come through a bit more. And then the lifestyle factor, then there was one reel just went massively viral, 5 something million views. And then the next one actually then must have just taken off the traction of that and went to
Yeah.
2 million views. And then a previous reel and shot up to 1 million something. And then there was like 3 or 4 in a row that were sort of hitting that like really high numbers. And then the next one was like 900 and something thousand. And then it petered off after that. And it kind of peaked up at about 120,000 followers. And then I started posting about rowing again. And then
Hmm.
the numbers came back, started to come down. So it like at the moment you sort of it waxes and wanes. And if I could show
Hmm.
you the metrics or the feedback on
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
on the Instagram, it goes up. Maybe there's a few days where you're gaining 100, 200, 300, and then a few days where you're losing 50, 60, 70, 50, 60, 70, and up 50, 60, 70, and down, then up, then down, then up, then down. And I think from last Christmas over like the last year, roughly, I gained about 12 and lost about 13, 14.
Hmm.
So like overall, then in that time I'm down, but it's because the people realized, oh, this isn't a lifestyle influencer. We're not getting the same
Yeah.
garbage every day of, I wake up and I have an acai bowl for my breakfast and I wake up at 4 a.m. And I do some piss take reels, which sorry, can I say piss take? Sure I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
That are funny and catch on a little bit. And
Hmm.
then sometimes I'll do a more serious training reel and it'll not flop, but it'll sort of hit that core audience. And I have
Yeah.
a core audience of like 30, 25 to 30,000 that view every single post, interact with every single post.
Hmm.
But I feel like the lifestyle side of it has exploded the number beyond what rowing can provide for
Hmm.
me. And then I can see that in the interactions then afterwards, you just don't seem to get the same engagement
Yeah.
with rowing only posts, but that's to be expected. At times, people don't love everything you do. People aren't on their phones every single day.
Hmm.
And you get different amounts of engagement per post. But if you do put up something that is catchy and it does take off, then a lot of the takeoff is actually with non-followers.
Hmm.
5 million views. At the time, I think I had like 30,000 followers. 5 million isn't coming from that 30,000. So there's
Yeah.
there's 4.9 million people out there who aren't following me but are
Yeah.
interacting with that post. So
Hmm.
as a percentage of uptake in followers, it's actually exceptionally small. But I suppose that's to answer your question, that's the evolution of the Instagram over that time. But there was that huge influx last year just with 3, 4, 5 reels all in a row, and then engagement on everything went up. across the board. But then it's sort of it's coming down now slowly, and
Mhm.
you're just having that core engagement from a smaller group of followers.
And I guess uh like sort of going from that point where you sort of ballooned up, did that open a lot of doors for you as an influencer or as a rower or both or neither?
Um, no, not really, to be completely
No.
honest. Because I have I'm the percentage of Irish followers is quite low.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of UK, US, and sort of European followers.
Hmm.
And for some reason, one of my reels went like was massive and had huge engagement in like India, Pakistan,
Yeah.
Malaysia for some reason. And so like the engagement numbers, the stats. So when you're talking the purely influencer type companies,
Hmm.
they're sort of looking at, especially in Ireland, they're looking at your percentage Irish audience.
Hmm.
And there could be an athlete out there with 3,000 followers with 60% Irish,
Hmm.
and the company will go with them over me, where I have like 11% or 12% Irish. And 11 or 12% of 112,000 is like 14, 15,000.
Yeah.
So their 60% is valued higher than
Hmm.
my 12. So you just get passed over a lot for that. But uh there hasn't been any massive monetary value,
Hmm.
as I suppose as you, but there are a lot of offers come through via email and things like that, but I turn most of them down because I just kind of like to do my own authentic content
Yeah.
as well. And when you start doing brand deals and brand, or like doing shout outs, and people, a lot of times people are very, the first thing to go in any time when money's scarce is marketing budgets. You
Hmm.
know, they might keep their core advertising budget, but you know, there's frivolous spend on paying someone on Instagram to put up a photograph for them. It's
Yeah.
gonna to like go down. So there wasn't much amount of opportunity within Ireland that I was finding, but I wasn't being overly aggressive in looking for it either. So
Hmm.
yeah, to answer your question, not really. No
Okay.
huge doors opened or opportunities that kind of came around. The same old opportunities that were around beforehand, I suppose,
Yeah.
really.
Fair enough. And then I guess in terms of sort of the content that you've made before as well, so you used to run a YouTube channel as well. I sort of found that earlier. And was there any reason that you sort of moved away from that and into doing Instagram stuff?
I kind of did the two of them in parallel for a long time, but
Hmm.
the honest answer is that the rowing federation that I'm with really didn't like the YouTube, and I got
Okay.
a lot of pushback about it a lot, and even from some of the athletes, I got a lot of pushback from.
Hmm.
Um, there's so it was a kind of a negative task, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. That I was the joy or the value that I got from it was kind of negated a little bit by other rowers' negativity.
Yeah.
And mostly from other athletes in the group, kind
Yeah.
of, why are you telling people that? Why are you telling people this? Why are you
Mm.
telling? And you sort of have to, like, I had to remind them at times, being like, this isn't North Korea.
Yeah.
These aren't world secrets.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, I'm not giving anything away. And they were like, well, you said that, oh, you didn't race me because I was injured. And I was like, you were injured.
Yeah.
It was a trial. It was published.
Hmm.
And then, I did one where I talked through funding for Irish athletes, how you get onto the funding scheme as an athlete to then
Mm.
become full time. And this is
Yeah.
all, if you Google it, you'll
Yeah.
find it in about 30 seconds. And I literally just almost just went through it step by step. If you're a university athlete, this is how you get onto a national team, and this is how you support yourself.
Mm.
These are the three categories. This is what you need to do. These are the results you need. And this is what you get from your results. This is when you'll get your funding. So this is how you make that step. And I got 3, 4 really angry, aggressive messages off some of the girls in the team,
Mm.
realistically. And I messaged them back, and I was like, I'm sorry you feel this way. But do
Hmm.
you know if you Google your name, you can see exactly how much money you get because it's a bursary from the government. It's
Yeah.
public information. And also, what part of the video did you not like? And then they said, oh, well, I didn't actually watch it. And I
Yeah.
just, so why are you, where's this anger coming from? Do you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
So I had to, then I was just like, look, it's not worth fighting the uphill battle all the time. And
Hmm.
I also found myself saying after an activity, oh, that would have been class, to film that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you shouldn't live your life thinking, flip, I didn't, that was a good experience. Why didn't I film it? You should just be able to live life. And then
Hmm.
ultimately, the best thing would be if somebody followed me with a camera all the time and I could just live my life and they could follow me. But, unfortunately, when you're making your own content, you do have to think ahead and you do have to be more tactical and calculated about
Hmm.
your day to day. And I just, that side of things then just meant that I sort of said to myself, the hassle, the time commitment, and then always retrospectively looking at events and thinking, oh, if only. And then I
Hmm.
just decided that, enough was enough. And I just would leave it off.
And I think it is definitely a shame that that sort of thing is hard to sort of work. And I think there's a lot of interest. So I was at Brooks in Oxford, and there's a lot of interest in that club and in that sport, and the coaches are often very sort of don't film this, don't put this online. I remember in my first year, someone made like a meme account talking about my training basically, and sort of within a week, it was like you have to take this down or we'll like kick you out of
Yeah.
the club. And I think that is a thing that does sort of happen a lot within the rowing world. It's definitely something that I would like to see change in the future. Um, and I mean, you get people like Cam Buchan as well, who's sort of jumped around a few different clubs and is often seen by some people as sort of like a bit annoying, basically. But at the end of the day, the content that he's putting out is like high quality stuff, and it's interesting to watch. And if it's not the sort of thing you want to watch, like let other people watch it and enjoy it. And it is a
Yeah.
bit of a shame.
Yeah. And I think you sort of with Cam as well, like obviously I know who he is, but
Mhm.
you sort of look at him and he had like one race in a national boat and then his whole YouTube is based around him trying to get onto the national team.
Mhm.
And then you look at how many years he's tried and failed. And
Mhm.
then you sort of think, even I find myself at times thinking, surely this guy should just move up, I don't know, get a job and move on.
Yeah.
Do you know? And then you're like, well, no, like he's enjoying what he's doing. He's obviously
Mhm.
making a few pounds selling programs online. Sorry, there's a
Yeah.
fucking fly here. Um, and if it isn't hurting him, then or if it isn't hurting anybody else, let him kind of crack on with it.
Mhm.
But his stuff is kind of more like comical to see what he's at
Yeah.
and see what's going on. But yeah, it is tough, and there is that like that huge secrecy side to things where people think that they're doing something absolutely revolutionary and
Mhm.
that you have to keep it secret until the moment of reveal at the last second.
Sort of move on a little bit here then. In terms of what you'd like to see change in the sport, we sort of talked about how that sort of secrecy is about like media and things like that is sort of potentially a barrier. Um, do you think how could that change? So I don't know if you've read Boys in the Boat at all, but I remember
Yeah, yeah,
particularly at the start of the book, there's always the reporter like following them around and asking them questions, and the coaches are sort of like, go away, go away. But I think, do you think that's something that could sort of potentially be brought back and sort of journalism be done more about rowing again?
100%. And I think the problem is that we do push them away and we do say no to the media. And
Hmm.
now the media have so many other stories that they're just like, all right, no, okay, bye.
Yeah.
They move on to something better. And
Hmm.
like we don't appreciate the power of media and the power of being able to brand athletes and the power of being able to brand the sport. And it's actually kind of sad because I see all the time, if you watch F1 Drive to Survive on Netflix, right?
Yeah. That's
Look what
something
that
that's come up on here
Netflix,
quite a few times. Yeah.
just letting Netflix in on its own has
Hmm.
done wonders for that sport, right? So
Exactly.
then they said, flip, this is class. So then the Tour de France let them in.
Hmm.
Then tennis let them in. Then golf let them in. because they see the value of people's insight. They see
Hmm.
the value of people being able to see what the sport means rather than just a newspaper article of Rory McIlroy wins again or Rory
Hmm.
McIlroy doesn't win. Oh, sad. You know, you see everything in behind it because people want to form connections with athletes and they want to like
Hmm.
rowing has no real superstars. We don't have a Simone Biles with
Hmm.
multiple Olympic medals. We don't have a Michael Phelps. There's no opportunity to create that person.
Hmm.
So there's nobody really stepping outside of the rowing results and doing something on a bigger stage.
Hmm.
And I think when you try to do that, because it's kind of because we're poor, does that make sense? There's
Yeah.
no money incentive in the sport to use the media to advantage. And I think with Irish rowing especially, we're massively disadvantaged with our distrust of the media because we had in Ireland there are two sports that won Olympic medals at the last
Hmm.
Olympics. There's boxing, which won two, and there's us who won two.
Hmm.
We have no sponsors.
Yeah.
The two sports in the country who won the medals, boxing doing very well. They have a few sponsors, but individually as athletes, they have more sponsors. We as a national federation have no monetary sponsor,
Hmm.
like none for our all our for our 50% of the medal market share in the country. Athletics Ireland, who have no medals but really market their athletes well and
Hmm.
allow them to engage with media. They're a non-centralized program, whereas we're a centralized program. So they're not as strictly controlled. They have huge sponsorships with insurance companies, etc., etc.
Hmm.
And they're laughing at us because they're like, "You have all the talent and you can't market it, and we have
Yeah.
half the talent and our budget's huge because we're marketing so well, and then we run out of money and we scrimp and save and we show up to the Sport Ireland, who are the government body, and say, oh, we're out, our budget's out, and they're like, well,
Hmm.
you get 95% of your funding from government, why don't
Yeah.
you have any sponsors?
Hmm.
So you have such a distrust in the media that you don't value the marketing. And if you watch those F1 Drive to Survive and the Tour de France as well,
Hmm.
you look at the the time that they devote to media interactions as well. Once the race is over, they're like, say one of the drivers, Lewis Hamilton, for example, or oh right, Lewis, you've media now.
Hmm.
They're escorted over 45 minutes, boom, move on.
But you get the same in football and everything as well. Like
Yeah,
that's something that's always
yeah.
happened. They're sat in a room and
There's
yeah.
somebody who says, you have media now, quick, let's give them their headline, give them their story,
Hmm.
move on. Because then the next time they'll come looking again, they'll come looking again, they'll come looking again. But if in rowing, I feel like we shut it out.
Yeah.
And like I don't want to badmouth any federations or things, but things can be done a lot better.
Yeah. I
You
definitely
can
agree.
embrace that side of things and use
Hmm.
it to your advantage. It's like, because it's the same with Instagram, oh, you shouldn't be putting that out. Or people are seeing you training, you're motivating your opposition. And I'm like, I'm not really motivating my
Hmm.
opposition. I mean, they're going to train hard no matter what. And
Yeah.
if we believe in our program so strongly and we want it to be a secret, they're hardly going to see, oh, there's Phil Doyle training on an Instagram reel. I'm going to go and train the way
Mm.
everyone sticks to their own program. They're not going to say, I've seen this guy on Instagram, so we're going to completely change now to try and do what he's doing
Yeah. And at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do. Like it's a sport where you go backwards in a straight line. Like,
as fast as you can. Yeah,
yeah.
and you're not going to do anything different.
Yeah.
So it's massively underutilized, and almost like the fear factor of the media is such a detrimental thing to rowing, and especially like world rowing. When you look at the competitions, you could go through an entire. I don't know if you've ever been to a World Championships, but you could go through an entire week of a World Championships, 8 days, and the last day, you maybe get once you win your medal, you're maybe pulled to the side.
Yeah.
Oh, what did you think? How did that feel? Okay,
Yeah.
lovely. Go and get your medal. That's
And
it.
it's not even like a big company. Usually, like when I went to U23s and it was Ulmok one came over and he interviewed us, but that was kind of it. Um, and there wasn't anything after that. It was like a quick. So how did the race go? It went well. Like we won. Okay, cool. Now go and do something else. That's it.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
did seem like a bit of a shame. Like it
Yeah.
could definitely be put out a lot better and a lot more things could be done with it. Um, and I think if you look at things like the boat race and Henley Royal, like those are two events as well where they'll do all of the media, they'll interview all of the athletes, especially with the boat race, and there'll be huge promo videos and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, why can this not be done to other aspects of the sport? So you'll have people talking to the cameras, setting up promos, and like there's more than enough money potential there. It's not like the boat race is completely like its own thing. It's still its own sport. And if you look at sort of American colleges as well, there's absolute buckets of money there, but nothing really ever gets done there. And it is just quite
Yeah,
interesting that no one's sort of gone, oh, this is a huge event that's put on every single year and like hundreds to thousands of people watch it, but hey, we'll just do it once a year and never actually do anything with it. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
And there's two athletes in our group, and I'll not mention their names, but you'll know exactly who they are. They did a funny set of interviews in Rio
Mm-hmm.
when they won a
Oh yeah.
medal, and that one media interaction that was taken off ended up on Graham Norton's chat
Yeah.
show, ended up on the Late Late Show, ended up with a YouTube video being produced by Red Bull,
Mm-hmm.
ended up with huge like household name,
Mm-hmm.
brand name recognition, to the point where they're not in the boat together anymore, but people still think that they, even though there's another guy in and one of the brothers is out,
Yeah.
people still ask me, they're like, oh, you do rowing, do you know the two brothers?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, but they haven't rowed together since 2019. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because they don't get an update. They're still going off that
Mm-hmm.
one funny interview in 2016.
And
So it's
there's, I don't know if you've seen, it was, I think it was Paul did the interview at Henley a couple of years ago, and that
yeah,
sort of gained a little bit of traction again because he's a funny guy. But it's
he's
like,
funny.
uh,
He's funny in an interview anyway.
yeah, but it's sort of it doesn't really go anywhere after that. So obviously they had the Red Bull video and they had the Graham Norton show, but then
Yeah.
it's sort of nothing's happened in rowing full stop since then that I've seen.
They do a small amount of like individual stuff within the country, but they don't really do media things. They kind of are still living off that one interview,
Mm-hmm.
but they actually can be the biggest naysayers towards like social media.
Yeah, because I noticed neither of them have social media that I could find anywhere.
One of them does, but he deletes it every now and then.
Hmm.
Deletes it, regains it, and deletes it, and has it back and deletes it. But the other one only has Twitter.
Hmm.
That's it. So like they sort of frown, and there's a big sort of like look down your nose at people who do try and put themselves out there, and then we
Hmm.
sort of have to remind them, like you have a sponsor or two because you did a funny interview in 2016.
Yeah.
Will you let us please try and promote ourselves or
Hmm.
brand ourselves because we don't have those sponsors? And
Yeah.
then they sort of say, oh, well, you're just being silly. It's so easy, and you're like, well, it's really not.
Yeah.
And that there's when there's a disconnect between they think that they did that all themselves, but it was the media machine that picked it up
Hmm.
and spun it out for them that then has ended up with them doing so well over time. But if you don't engage with the media then after that, then you're going to lose that traction, and I think the traction has massively been lost from there.
Yeah. And I think quite a big part of it was the sort of story that they then formed around after that interview. And I think every single rower that I've ever bumped into has a story that's like everyone's been on a journey to get to where they are and what they've won and what they haven't won.
Yeah.
And it's just there's so much potential in every single direction, whether you're someone that's won bucks or if you're someone that's won a world championship, like everyone's done something at some point to get to the position where they are. And there's an infinite sort of bottomless pit of content that you could produce and make interesting if the sort of right person came along. Um, I don't know if you've seen Eamon Glavin. He's started up the
Yeah.
rowing network.
I know him, and yeah, I've met
Oh
him
yeah.
a few times. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that sort of program and how that's going?
His personal page did very, very well. Like, he in around the Olympic qualifiers before Tokyo,
Hmm.
when I don't know how, but reels were just being pushed huge by Instagram as a social platform, and
Yeah.
he ended up gaining a good amount of followers. And his content is he ticks a lot of boxes, great quality,
Hmm.
very well edited, and he of course isn't a rower himself, so he has the time and he has the opportunity
Hmm.
to film and create that content. and then because as a rower, I find myself sometimes I'm like, I can't just stick a GoPro on the boat every single time. You know,
Yeah.
you have to, unless you have someone like that who isn't actually physically rowing, you can't create that level of content. The quality of content that he creates is just not it's unparalleled
Mm-hmm.
by any other rower out there. He's drone shots. He has a what does he have? The camera he has is
Yeah, he's got like
uh,
film cameras and things, doesn't he?
yeah, it's like a red box something. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's like a 15,000-20,000 dollar camera.
Yeah.
So I just don't I wouldn't have the money to invest.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little drone and I kind of enjoy flying that around. But if I'm flying my drone, I can't row. So I can film all my teammates, but I can't film myself. And I suppose if you start creating if I started creating content of the Rowing Ireland team and putting it up, then a few of the athletes would come to me and be like, I don't want you to put that up of me on,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to put that up of me on
Yeah.
your page. And I'm like, all right, okay. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. And it is
So,
tough when it's such a team sport. Like when you go to the Olympics as Ireland, for example, you go as Ireland, you don't go as sort of, well, I guess you do go as a double and a four or
yeah,
whatever it is, but it's like at the end of the day, it's like Ireland won this many rowing medals and whoever it is.
yeah.
And I think it is a big, like, it's a team sport and it's sort of the whole team. And no matter what level, it's sort of, this is the squad, this is the school team or whatever it might be. So it's,
It's very hard to like individualize yourself and step away from the team. Then even though we're only in a two-man boat, it's very difficult to to try and spin. It's not that you want to spin it about yourself, but you either create yourselves as a brand in the boat,
mm-hmm,
as the others did in Rio, or you try and make yourself an athlete as a brand. But when you're not an individual athlete, it's named as Irish men's double wins.
mm-hmm,
It's not my name
yeah,
wins. It's the team. It's not
mm-hmm,
like if you look at the Rugby World Cup at the weekend, it's like it's the All Blacks versus South Africa. It's
yeah,
not the names of the players, even though as rugby players they are massively recognized. But if you looked at the number of thousands of people who are invested in the South Africa rugby team, if you
mm-hmm.
looked at the individual accounts of each rugby player, they wouldn't have, you'd have a minor fraction of what the overall supportership is for the team.
But
So
it's
they,
interesting that comes up as well because if you look towards football, you obviously have people like Messi and Ronaldo who,
yeah,
on their own, have entire followings. I remember when Ronaldo went to Real Madrid, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, there's this cool team in Spain that plays football, and now my favorite player's gone." And a huge, huge following sort of went in that direction. Uh, do you think there is potential for people to say, "Oh, I like this rower in this boat"?
and they'll try and watch it.
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of guys who like guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a sort of a big sort of gay um following, and a lot of them wouldn't have much interest in rowing whatsoever and just enjoy workout photographs of guys in lycra. I'll
Mm-hmm.
put it like that. And like they're really really nice guys, and sometimes they would message me with encouragement and stuff like that. And if it's a genuine message and it's not strange or spam,
Mm-hmm.
I'll engage and reply. And if it's a genuine question, then I'll answer it. And then sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I actually watched your race.
Mm-hmm.
Well done." And I'm like, and then I'll say, "Was that the first rowing race you've ever watched?" And I'm like, "Yeah, first one ever. Really interesting." And
Mm-hmm.
then they'll be like, "Oh, thanks." And then you're like, "There's one more person watching the sport."
Yeah.
There's one, but like this World Championships was the first World Championships where the heats have been videoed that I've been part of.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my friends, even at home, who would want to watch my races, they're kind of like, "Where can we watch it?" And I'm like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
can watch the semi-final maybe
Yeah. I
later on
remember
in
when I
the
went
week."
to under 23 Euros, there was no video at all for even the finals.
Yeah.
And it is a shame.
Whereas I have friends, very good friends in the Irish athletics teams who will go and race at like a domestic event and it'll
Mm-hmm.
be televised on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple, real simple things where it's just
Mm-hmm.
like accessibility to viewership,
Mm-hmm.
because not too many people are going to be willing to travel to Serbia.
Exactly.
not it's not a 5-star holiday destination that people are like,
Mhm.
oh, we'll go for a few days and stay on,
Mhm.
or oh, it'd be amazing to be in that part of the world, or like the Paris Olympics, especially people are like, oh my God, Paris, and then we can have a few days in Paris afterwards. So like there's a huge interest around that. So
Mhm.
the venues as well sometimes draw like the viewership,
Yeah.
but it is difficult when you don't have that access. But then you look at things like Michael Jordan back in the day when there was no social media, like there was
Mhm.
no that didn't exist. So, but if you read, I've read a few of his books, and I've read books by reporters on him,
Mhm.
especially there's one really really good one after he left Chicago Bulls and he went to the Washington Wizards.
I I couldn't tell you.
He went for like 2 seasons on a 2-year contract.
Mhm.
And they went from being like an in the red club with 40% empty seats
Mhm.
to 10 million profit in that one season, with
Mhm.
every season ticket sold and every home game that year completely sold out, and jersey sales through the roof.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
was a guy who controlled the media, as in he allowed certain reporters access for interviews. He gave them little treats if they were good to him and spun a headline his way.
Mhm.
And he was like, not don't want to say manipulator, but he was a master at influencing the media to his gain. Like he was caught up in a lot of scandals.
Yeah.
Um, and this one reporter kind of talked about how he was in his favor, and then he came out of his favor after he put one article out, and he was like, once he was blacklisted by MJ, then he had no access to anything that he said, and he was just hearing things from other reporters, and there was sometimes he would be like MJ would be giving an interview and talking to a few reporters, and he would show up and he would just stop speaking and just stare at him
Mhm.
until he left, and then he would keep speaking again. And he was like, once you get frozen out by somebody so influential and so powerful, that like, but that's where like back then the media needed the athletes more because there
Mhm.
was so much more value.
Yeah.
But now because social media is so prominent, and people in the media can just either pick something up off social media if they could be bothered, or send somebody with a toy camera to pick up a few wee bits at a competition and
Mhm.
then leave. Like I remember in 2019, we won the silver, came off the water, went straight up to the interview. There was a huge big interview area, same
Mhm.
as usual. We were interviewed by Pinsent. We were interviewed by a couple of RTE. They had sent a full film crew. Each had a full setup for interviews. They were playing it live through BBC and RTE. And then we went down and got our medals. And then this year, like there was no BBC setup.
Mhm.
No, RTE had a guy with like a literally a handheld camcorder, and they asked 2 questions, and then that was it. And they were just
Yeah.
like, you know what, the Rugby World Cup's on, so we're not bothered.
Mhm.
And then the BBC guy had wasn't even BBC, like the main BBC, was like BBC Northern Ireland, and a guy who actually is friendly enough with my father, a really really nice guy who does take interest in time in Northern Irish rowers. And he did a short interview then, like half an hour afterwards, but it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't shown on the news.
Mhm.
It was put on their app, and
Yeah.
like sure, how many people are going to click into that? So
Mhm.
you don't get the same traction. But it's something that you could talk for hours on and how to improve it. But be interested. What are your thoughts? How do you think they could improve viewership and interest in branding of rowing?
Oh, this was so my dissertation actually did. I don't know if you've heard of Feather and Square, but I did my dissertation with them and sort of how to build their brand online. They're
Yeah.
still a rowing company. And one of the case studies I came across was the Premier Lacrosse League in America, and it was basically these two guys that sort of saw the Major Lacrosse League at the time, and they were like, "This is a load of rubbish," and like lacrosse is a sport for posh people and no one watches it, and it's like they're not paying the athletes and nothing's basically no one cares. And they went off and they set up the Premier Lacrosse League, and the whole basis of that was it was athlete based, so they followed the athletes individually, and sort of all the content that they pushed out, it was instead of sort of the league or the teams saying, hey, we're starring this person, they were like, hey, this person's on our team, go and look at his account, and see what he has to say. And that meant that engagement. So as you probably know, as you get more followers, you get a smaller engagement rate. So if you've got, like you were saying earlier, 6,000 people, you'll have maybe like 2,000 people that engage, or if you've got 100,000, you'll get 10,000 engaged. What they did was they have like
I
100,000 people following them, and they have like a 50-60% engagement rate because they say, hey, go look at this person, they will talk to you and they can interact with you. And then they
yeah
also sort of, a whole part of their system is going through social media. So social media is obviously cheaper than typical news media outlets, and it's way more accessible. So that means that pretty much anyone can see it and anyone can engage. And anyone, if you see a player that played yesterday and you said that was a neat goal you scored or whatever it is, you can say that to them, and then there's a good chance that they'll reply. Whereas if you're messaging like the Chelsea
yeah
Football Club main page, there's far less likely that you're gonna get that response. So it's just cool to see how that's actually been applied, and now it's like way more successful than lacrosse ever was. And it's sort of now one of the main things on TV in terms of sport in America, because they sort of completely switched it on its head from, hey, we're not going to put anything on social media and we're not going to let anyone engage to engage with us, speak to us, tell us what you want. And I think that's definitely something that could be done in rowing. And that sort of wrote an article about that as well, saying like if you're a rowing club and you've got like 1,000 followers, you can immediately get people talking to you and engaging in your content. And there's not much you have to do to get people to engage. You just have to say like either ask a question and you're going to get someone replying. But if you don't do that sort of thing, then it's a lot less likely that people are going to sort of talk to you and engage in your content, and then it's never going to sort of get pushed out anywhere. And that was sort of, I found that quite interesting, that it's really not hard to get content pushed out and sort of get sort of in the flow of the algorithm. It's just a case of knowing what you're doing rather than, and sort of also allowing it to happen.
yeah
Um, yeah.
there's some content whenever I had like sort of that sort of 15 to 20,000 followers, I would get like 90 to 100, sometimes more views on reels, and
Mm-hmm.
like maybe 1 to 2K likes, and engagement was pretty good on
Mm-hmm.
posts. And then once I went up to like the 100 and something, like every now and then something would take off to like 400 or 500,000 views, but the
Mm-hmm.
majority of things is sort of falling around that. I'll flick it up here and I'll tell you now. Actually, there's one I put up yesterday, which is on today, 25K views. So in less than 24 hours, 25K. But that'll stagnate at around 40 or 50
Mm-hmm.
unless the algorithm picks it up, but it might not. Then there was one the day before that, that's 98.1, which is slightly unusual. But then there was one there, 38.1, 33.1, 60, 78, 79, 31, then 500 and something, 40, 80, 60, 40, 50, 50. Whereas back when I was on like my 30 or 40, like in around 25, I have 120, 85, 76, 148, 140,
Mm-hmm.
40, 44, 45, 46, 70, 78, 160. Like that's, as a percentage, huge compared to your
Yeah.
audience.
Mm-hmm.
So you're obviously being picked up and thrown out by the algorithm, and people are coming across your content more and more and more. But then once, as you said, like that kind of like, there's like micro influencers, meso influencers, and then macro influencers. Macro influencers are like 250K and above. Meso are like
Yeah.
sort of 20 to 150, 200, and then your micros are like under 15 really.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're saying that like brands are actually preferring micro influencers because
Because more
the
people
content is
engage in it.
being, yeah, it's getting massive uptake.
And it's a lot more something that I was sort of look into. Basically, people say it's more realistic. Like if you get, I don't know, Kim Kardashian, like no one really cares about any, like she's a character, she's not a real person.
She's also
But if
getting
you find
paid a
someone
huge
that,
amount of money for it as well. Yeah.
yeah, but you'll get someone that's 10,000 followers, and it's like, okay, I can see that that's a real life human being, and they're
Yeah.
speaking and acting like a real life human being. And if they say, I don't know, this water bottle's really good at holding water, I'll believe them.
But
um,
you also get pigeonholed as well into your content type.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually probably one of my problems, is that I'm kind of half pigeonholed, half not. Every now and then I'll do something completely out of the algorithm or out of sorts of what the usual content that I put up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes it flops, sometimes it doesn't. Like I put up something with me, as I very rarely put stuff up to do with like the doctoring thing as much as rowing.
Mm-hmm.
Like once in a blue moon, I put up something to do with like with me and work the other day, and like it got like 6, 7 thousand likes within like the first couple of hours, and I was like, "Fuck! Well, people actually like this,
Yeah.
There's and people were commenting and messaging me and about it and things. So like people actually like the lifestyle balance type of things with
Mm-hmm.
balancing work and rowing. That seems to be the big driver in the interest in the content. And then sometimes I'll put up something that I know is like, oh, that'll people like this kind of thing, and it'll just do middling. And then
Mm-hmm.
I have a few things in my head where I have really good ideas for really funny reels, but they're kind of not big budget reels, but like I'll have to put a little bit of effort, gather a few props, put a
Mm-hmm.
bit of time, shoot a few angles, and like it's a couple of hours of effort into the one
Yeah.
reel. And I know it will do really, really well. Like I know for a fact that it'll do really, really well. Like I
Mm-hmm.
did one about different types of rowers on the rowing machine. And I was in my kitchen with like all the outfits set out, and my mom was like, "What are you doing?" It was during lockdown. She's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm changing now into this. I'm going out to do that." And then I took the thing and I was like, "I wonder if I was like, I just know this will do well." And then you put it up and it goes like 300,000, 400,000 views, and you're like, "Yeah, I knew that was gonna do well." And
Yeah.
then so these things, but it's just taking the time to go and put yourself out there, because you put yourself out in the limb when you put up something like that, because you're like,
Mm-hmm.
I've put a lot of effort into this. What if people don't like it?
Yeah.
Do you know? What if it goes and it only gets 20,000 views and it's taken me 4 hours to make? So you're like,
And
sometimes
it's
it's the fear of like it not doing well, but then you're like, oh, I'll stay to my niche, I'll stay to my niche. But
yeah.
those accounts, those macro accounts that get the huge engagement, or there's one called a guy Shabazz says, and he's like, oh, today on Rich versus Poor or Richo versus Pavo or something.
Oh, yeah.
And he has like these funny videos, and like they're constant. Like I watched him, I followed him from he had like 120,000 followers. So it's like, this guy's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And like over the next 2, 3 months, he just went 1 million, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. And like he puts up a video of him like talking about like he was a school teacher, and it gets like 50,000 views, and then he puts up his today on Rich versus Poor things 1.5, like, huge, like he gets his whole 1 point something million views from his followers and more,
Yeah.
each and every single one. And then there'll be like like 3 million, 3 million, 3 million, 50,000, 3 million, 3 million, 3 million, 50,000. And like the 50,000 is like him doing something off brand, off
Yeah.
niche. And unfortunately, I'm just like, as a lifestyle person, you're not you have don't your niche is your lifestyle, and some people like some of the stuff and some people don't, and that's just how
Mm-hmm.
it flops. So it's always a really interesting conversation about content production. And
Yeah.
that's why sometimes I've had a couple of brands approach me and say, oh, will you do this or will you do that? And I'm like, no, because that's not something I would do.
Yeah.
There's one brand about some like shared living thing, and they were like, oh, well, you come and stay in it, and as for young professionals and doctors and things moving around, and they would come and they would have a flat here, and there's a gym and a pool, and it's all built into this one complex, and you pay per week, and it's all fancy. And they're like, oh, you come up to Dublin for a week, live here for a week, you can train here, and we'll pay you this much, and you can put up this much content. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
I would never ever do that. That's just like completely against me. And I know if I put that content out there, it will just completely flop.
Yeah. And that
You
was
won't get
something
any
as
engagement.
well that I researched. There was a study done about, I think it's very niche, but it's Winter Olympic athletes in the US. And it was basically saying you'll get people like Shaun White that have got hundreds of thousand followers, and they sort of
Yeah.
cut those people out. But then you'd get sort of the smaller people that didn't have quite as many. And it was basically saying how much engagement there was when they're sort of doing branded pictures. So there'd be one picture where someone's saying, hey, like, buy this water bottle that's like a certain brand. Do you like it? Get it, buy it, use my link. And then there's another one where it's someone doing like a backflip and they've got like a no fear snowboard, and they've not said, hey, buy a no fear snowboard. It's just them doing a backflip on a snowboard. And those pictures would get way more engagement and way more everything. And sort of a lot more people would also then go and like they can track everything, so they go back and say this many people since you posted this picture bought no fear snowboards, and we can sort of pretty accurately say that's because you posted this picture.
Yeah.
And it was
I
quite
think
interesting that
sometimes,
if you don't disclose that it's a brand deal, you're way more likely to sort of get that engagement, and it works for you and the company.
but then you can't, it's illegal to advertise a
Yeah.
product. So that's what I thought. I genuinely said clicking that button that said this is a paid promotion is
Mhm.
almost like putting the post to death.
Yeah.
Unless it's just you're so ridiculously niche that people will engage anyway.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's difficult. It's difficult. But then you get companies that have small budgets and they reach out to you and say, "Oh, will you do this for this much?" And you just have to say no.
Mhm.
So it's hard to. That's it. Suppose back to your question about has anything been able to like has anything opportunities come of it and things like that. But
Mhm.
I think my biggest problem as well is I have medicine in the back pocket, so it de-incentivizes me to monetize the social media side of things
Yeah.
because if I'm like, oh, that was a heavy month, I
Mhm.
better get a brand deal. I'll be like, no, that was a heavy month. I'll go work. I'll go to work for a few days, or
Yeah.
I'll work an extra few shifts. So like the monetization side of it, it's kind of nice to not be that defined as that influencer type because that's not what I want. The influence I want to have is to get more kids into rowing, more kids into
Mhm.
sport, more kids being active and enjoying, and having an insight into being like, because everyone's like, oh, you're a professional rower, and I'm like, it's not professional.
Yeah.
It's you get enough to pay your bills. I
Mhm.
am not a professional athlete. I am a full-time athlete, but I am not a professional athlete. Please do not get that mixed up. And like, of course, if a huge sponsorship deal came across and they were like, look, we'll give you 50 grand for the year if you
Mhm.
come and do a talk in our headquarters, open up one of our offices and do a team sports day with the business, then I'll be like, yeah, sounds fucking class. But apart from that, then I'm just like, no, sorry, I'm not gonna kill myself for 250 quid or 500 pounds for one post on social media.
Mhm. So you sort of briefly mentioned sort of your goals there in terms of getting your content out and get people involved in the sport. Have you put anything sort of specifically into that, or have you sort of looked into setting up events or anything like that, or is it mainly just sort of the content that you
No,
make?
I haven't looked into I do like I'm part of an ambassador program where I go and speak in schools called Dare
Mm,
to Believe, which is I set up through the OFI. And the plan when I step away from rowing is to kind of continue that kind of like speaking role
mhm.
in schools, and hopefully the social media side of things will allow me a platform just to reach out and communicate with teachers and schools about that.
Yeah.
Because through the medicine I have all my police and security vetting
Mhm.
to work and treat kids because I was a pediatric doctor for a while, so like I'm a safe person to go into schools,
Yeah.
and I really enjoy that and I love that engaging with the kids. So to continue on in that would be one of the best ways. But I haven't massively taken any huge steps towards it, to be honest.
Mhm. Would you, so something that I've sort of, I'm not sure if I've actually mentioned it on here before, but something that I'd like to do with this project is basically set up like a rowing league. And that's something that I've looked a little bit into. Um, but essentially it would be a case of getting people to sort of shift that focus away from, I guess, traditional rowing. Do you think something like that could work out? Do you think people would be interested in moving away from rowing in a straight line, sort of 5 or 6 events a year, or do you think that's not something that could happen?
I think if there was a rowing league, that would be class. If you look at all the opportunities around this time of the year, Basel Head, Head of the Charles, and
Hmm.
the Philly Cup, like those are all things that every rower would be loving to be involved in. It's just the cost of those events is huge, so
Exactly.
the big names get invited. And like I was invited to Basel Head there myself to row in the grade eight, and I had to turn it down because my coach was like, "What are you going to do that for? No, what's the point? What's the
Hmm.
point? You don't want to get injured. You're a scholar. Why are you rowing a sweet boat? That's just
Yeah.
an injury. That's an injury. 2 days away from training. That's it." I think the seriousness of the sport is completely. It
Hmm.
makes it hard.
That was definitely something that I found as well. Like sometimes when I was training, it's like we're a uni club, we're a uni team, and we're saying like don't go out, don't drink, don't like. I remember before Henley, everyone, it probably is appropriate, might cut it out, but there was like a don't sleep with your girlfriend 2 weeks before Henley because you can't be doing that. You need to boost your hormones. And it's like, we're
That's a
literally
different
like
topic.
at
That's
uni,
a
like
different
enjoy
topic, Ben,
yourself.
for another day.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, enjoy it. Like have fun. It's
Yeah.
not that
You've got
serious.
to find balance and everything. As long as, but if you're really pushing for results, sometimes you do have to have sacrifice.
Hmm. Yeah. And it is one thing, but I remember we went to Bucks this year in the Coxed Four, and it was like we'd gone in pretty gung ho. Like we had a American world champion, we had a we had a Dutch. He'd been to the World Cup, and then I'd done U23s, and we went in and we won by like 20 seconds, and it was like, did we really need to take it that seriously? Like, it's Bucks is generally a more sort of fun event, and it's like sometimes you can
Yeah.
afford to have a bit of fun with it. I don't know if you've ever done home internationals. Um,
No, skip
uh,
that. Yeah.
what I've heard about that is that that's a lot more of like a laid back event, and like you go and you do the racing, and then like everyone goes out and enjoys themselves that evening. And I think it would be quite interesting to see more events run in that way, and sort of more coaches allowing that sort of event to happen as well. So say we'll go out, we'll do the race, and then we'll have fun, and then we
Yeah.
won't worry about it. Um, but
You have to find
there's that
balance
much
as long
going
as you
on.
can perform at the same time. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. I've kind of run out of questions here.
Excellent. Because I am 2 minutes late for weights.
Sorry about that. I
No,
guess
don't
to
worry.
wrap up, thanks very much for coming on and having a chat, and
Cheers,
it's been
Ben.
very insightful. So yeah, good luck at Paris and your training building up to there,
Thanks
and
very much. I'll
hopefully
try
we'll hear
and
from you.
hopefully do something more interesting over the next few months as well.
Awesome. See you soon.
Cheers, Ben.
Bye.
Bye.